Well, hello everyone. Yes, I have no voice, but I must scream about the fact that we finally have the first copyright on an AI generated image. Well, that's probably not the best way to say it. An artist who made an image using AI. And this is big. We've been talking about this. It's kind of been leading up to this. So hopefully my voice is going to hold out for the rest of this. Just to quickly summarize what we've talked about, there needs to be human creativity in something in order for you to copyright it. And so like they've said in the past that if something is just the output of an algorithm, like a white noise generator, it can't copyright it. Remember when YouTube put that copyright claim on a guy who used white noise? No. And we also talked about the Supreme Court case Feist v. Rule. This is where a telephone company sued a directory for stealing their copyright. And the Supreme Court was like, what are you talking about? You just made a list of people and sorted them alphabetically by last name. There's no creativity there, so you can't copyright it. And what they said was that the amount of creativity needed for a copyright claim is low, but it does exist. And so as I've talked about in other videos, what is that for AI generating? Is typing in a prompt enough? Does it have to be a long and complex prompt? Do you have to do something else to it? Well, this is not the final answer. It's just the first answer showing us one kind of image that you might be able to claim a copyright on if you do it this way. And yes, I know, longtime listeners, you know my feelings about copyright and IP. But however you feel about it, however you think about whether or not it should be the case, the fact is there is still a lot of attention made in the world of art to whether or not you can get a copyright on something. And we see this too as well with patents. Look at how many inventions were made by the father of American invention, Thomas Jefferson. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. He doesn't really get credit for it, though, in the history books when you learn about it in class, because he had precisely 0 patents. Ben Franklin had all sorts of patents. Thomas Edison had all sorts of patents. They say, hey, look at what a great inventor they are because they have this many patents. Jefferson could have gotten all those patents, but he didn't because he didn't believe in patents, and so he kind of gets pushed to the side, even though he probably did a lot more than anyone else in America's earlier history. Just so many things he invented, even way before their time. It was amazing. So here we have an image called a single piece of American cheese. And it's using Invoke AI. I've been using that for a couple of years now, maybe a bit more. I'm not exactly sure, since like the version 2 era. It's come a long way since then. It's free open source software. You can download it and run it on your computer. If your computer doesn't have the clocks for it, they do have a cloud service you can buy, but you don't have to pay them anything for the version that you just download and use on your computer. It's completely free. It's open source. It's on GitHub. So really, shout out to all the developers for this gift to the world. It's amazing. I use Invoke AI. I love it. This is actually an Invoke t-shirt. Had to wear it for this occasion. So here we have a comparison with an AI-generated image and then the final. And the final you can see is very different. And even if you're looking, like you look along her nose are different, lips are different. He's changing like minor little things. I think he probably retouched every single part of this. I'm linking to a video where he shows a time lapse of him creating it, so you can get an idea of just how much went into this. And the thing is, he made this specifically to see if Invoke could get a copyright on it. Because if you just randomly generate something, you don't. A randomly generated image has no creativity. But look, he's put that third eye on there and it kind of looks like the Christian fish. And he's put a piece of cheese on her head that's melted. Her hair's made of spaghetti. There's all that stuff going down on her neck and below it. So yeah, this is from the CEO of Invoke, Kent Kiersey. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that at all well. I mispronounce names for those of you who don't see my videos. I just apologize to everyone because whoever you are, I'm going to mispronounce your name. The image was created entirely with generative AI, and Invoke just got a copyright for it. If you're surprised by that, you're not alone. I was too. This is a CNET article written by Caitlin, oh my god, Chedraui. Okay, no hope of me pronouncing that one. Sorry, Caitlin. Good article, though, because this is about how much creativity do you introduce into the process. And we got at least some answers on this. There's still a long way to go. There are still a lot of questions to be made. But this will go down in the annals of copyright as the first ever AI-generated image with a copyright. He started off with just that basic AI image that he got by prompting and went through a few to find one he liked. And then he started doing inpainting, and I think inpainting was the only technique he used. I think that was the point. Can you get to a copyright with just inpainting? In Invoke, there are so many other tools you can use rather than inpainting. Even just what they've done in the last year is staggering. I don't think I'm exaggerating at all when I say that this application is getting close to being a Photoshop killer. And I didn't even say that about GIMP. As much as I want it to be, GIMP is just too far behind and developing too slowly. There's still a lot of things Photoshop can do that it can't. But man, when I'm doing art and I'm using Invoke, I'm finding myself going into Photoshop less and less. On very rare occasions, really. Now it's pretty much start to finish in Invoke unless I pull it into Photoshop or Lightroom just to do the last finishing touches like you would on a photo. But it's amazing. He added roughly 35 of these AI edits to the original AI image, ultimately resulting in the final image. Each one of which was deliberate and based on how he thought the end result should look. And it's the fact that he was very hands-on that led to this. Invoke first applied for a copyright in August of 2024 and was denied because the Copyright Office said it lacked the human authorship necessary to support a copyright claim, because they were probably thinking, like people normally think about AI art, you go to DALL-E or Midjourney, you type in something and it just gives you and you just go with that. That's not the idea behind Invoke at all. Invoke works on top of Stable Diffusion, and that's the same one that Comfy and Automatic 1111 are built on top of. The difference is Invoke is really geared towards the artist, which is why I love it. Invoke followed up with more evidence, including a time-lapse video, again I've linked that below, of the image's creation and an explanation of how Kiersey was involved in the creation process. The copyright gave its stamp of approval on January 30. Congratulations, guys. Way to go with that. The office granted approval and said it determined the image contains a sufficient amount of human original authorship in the selection, arrangement, and coordination of the AI-generated material that may be regarded as copyrightable. The keywords in there are selection, coordination, and arrangement. In the certificate of registration, the office said that the AI-generated components were excluded from the copyright claim. It was Kiersey's collaging of all these elements that resulted in creating something new enough, something expressing sufficient human creativity that was eligible for copyright. And in this case, the Copyright Office granted the claim. I'm not sure how I feel about the term collaging. Basically, what you'll see when you use Invoke, you do the inpainting, and then you get all these layers that are like the transparent changes you've made on top of what you've done before, and then all those layers go together to make your final image. And so I can see it being analogous to collaging because they are elements that are being put together. And you can think of each and every one of those elements, since that particular little piece of image was AI generated, then you don't have a copyright on the pieces, only on how you put the pieces together. But that's what art is anyway. You're taking things and you're putting them together, whether it's paint or AOL CDs or whatever. That's what art is. It is so much more than collaging, though. And it's much more creative and hands-on and controllable than that. But for copyright purposes, I can see how it's analogous, so okay. Pursuant to guidance from the federal agency, creators have to disclose any AI usage in their work, that's when they actually go and make the claim for copyright. Those AI elements are considered pre-existing material and aren't covered by the copyright. Instead, it's the new things people are adding, their original imagery, text, and so on, that are covered. In Kiersey's case, the composite image made by his deliberate manipulation of each piece is what's protected. In other words, the individual parts of the image aren't copyrighted, but the sum of those parts is, thanks to Kiersey's direction. To me, that sounds a bit like saying you don't own the paint on the paintbrush, just the shape it makes on the canvas. Okay, yeah, that's the idea of it. You don't own, Pantone 236 or whatever color you're using, but you make a picture with it, you own the picture. Make a sculpture out of AOL CDs, you don't own the rights to AOL CDs, but you own the rights to the sculpture. All right, then we have Judd Lauder, special counsel at Cooley LLP, who worked on the copyright application for Invoke, so way to go, Lauder. Hopefully this will be a nice little feather in your cap there. I give the example of making a collage out of old photos. So there, imagine you find a box of photos that are 100 years old. They're out of copyright. No one owns them. You make a collage out of those old photos. That collage would probably be protectable under the Copyright Act, because even though the individual photos aren't protected, what you've done with them is creative and warrants protection. And that's the sort of thing that artists have fought for quite a lot, not so much in terms of copyright protection, but in terms of just acceptance by the art world. We've talked about examples like Marcel Duchamp grabbing the urinal, sticking it on a pedestal sideways, writing Armut on it. So there, see, that's a sculpture. Fountain. Yeah. Is it art? Well, we're still talking about it all these decades and decades and decades later. Probably doing better than most other pieces of art. And it kind of again goes against what a lot of the anti-AI artists seem to be talking about, which I've described as kind of a labor theory of art. Oh, well, you didn't put each stroke of the brush on the canvas, and that means you're not really doing art. There is a lot of technique to art that depends on the medium, but that's not what makes it art. There's a difference between painting and making art. There's a difference between drawing and making art. Drawing is about rendering something. One of those police sketch artists can do that. Art is about something more. It's about the creativity. It's putting your soul, putting your dream into what you're making. And as long as the tool that you're using allows you to do that in any way, then it can be used to make art. So this logic falls in line with the latest guidance from the Copyright Office published last month. The report said that images edited or enhanced with generative AI could be eligible for copyright, like movies that use AI de-aging tech or photos retouched with generative editing. The prompts that create AI images aren't copyrightable, since it's the generators that interpret and create the images potentially limitlessly. That's interesting, because remember I talked about that in that other video. I pulled up Invoke and I just typed in tree and I got a tree. And it's like, is that enough creativity to make that copyrightable? And then, you can put in this whole big, long, detailed prompt where you're exactly describing the particular kind of tree you want. At what point does it go from being basically the sort of thing that you put in a search engine to being something actually creative? What they're saying here is that no matter what, the prompt is not copyrightable. Because no matter what, it's the AI that interprets it. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was a court case in the future where an artist was going to deliberately make them litigate that question, because if you write this long and complex prompt, I think you could really make the case that there's a good amount of creativity there. Images entirely created by AI without sufficient human editing, however, still can't be copyrighted since there's not enough human contribution in the process. So type a prompt into DALL-E 3, copy and paste whatever image, you'd likely be denied. What's interesting is that every element of Kiersey's A Single Piece of American Cheese is AI generated. There isn't a human generated base photograph or design underneath it all. The image has a kind of absurdity Kiersey said he was inspired by and reflects his experience trying to get copyrights on AI images. And he said, "The woman is made of this kind of fractured stained glass, and that is, in essence, what we got copyright on. We did not get copyright on each individual shard or each individual element because that's AI generated. But what we did get a copyright on is the whole of that composition. The shards of glass if they were melted together by American cheese." Human authorship, meaning the work in question was created by a real-life human, is one of the most fundamental requirements for copyright. Remember the monkey that took a selfie? And then the guy who owned the camera tried to get a copyright, and then PETA tried to get a copyright? Yeah, that was crazy. But in the age of AI art, there are a lot of debates and questions about just how involved actual humans are in the creative process. Kiersey and his legal team argued that Invoke's Inpainting tool and other features gave him enough creative control over the work to warrant a copyright. Now, this next part of it goes over the AI cases, which we've covered before, so I'm not going to get into those. And Louder said, "What we've demonstrated here is that we've defined a threshold. I think creators are going to continue to test what those boundaries are, like if you're using something else other than Inpainting, if you're using a control net or something like that, or any of the other tools you have. There's so many tools and so many more coming all the time. Because remember, it's not about what any individual tool does, it's how it's all put together. That's where the art comes, is where everything is put together. You don't own the colors that you mix on the palette, you own the shapes you paint on the canvas. That's where your art is. Both in terms of how human creativity is applied and embodied within content created with the assistance of AI, and also how much creativity is going to be needed to reach that threshold, and the way we figure it out is through example. While Kiersey has no immediate plans for A Single Piece of American Cheese now that it's copyrighted, he sees it as an important milestone. The legal, ethical, and bigger philosophical questions around AI images and copyright will continue, but there's still a place for human creativity with AI. And this is big, I'm telling you, this is going to propel this discussion forward. Because whether it should be that way or not, whether or not you can copyright something is seen as giving a kind of credibility to art. And Kiersey said, "I think our relationship with technology is changing, and it's going to be different. It's important for people to realize that humans aren't going away. Just as with all technology, we're finding a new way to relate to it, and the creativity that we have matters just as much as it did 5 years ago before we had all of this stuff. And it will always matter, no matter how much the AIs take over, no matter how advanced they become. We will still have creativity, we will still have dreams, we will still have a need to put those dreams out and let everyone else see them. And that's all that's ever needed for art. And we shouldn't let copyright hold us back, just like we shouldn't let the Neo-Luddites hold us back either. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, go to donate.bogosity.tv. Keep me doing what I do. Make a one-time payment or subscribe, Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Get these videos early and ad-free. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.